This is the user sign-in page with the username and password. This is to secure the app, so only executives may access the data. You can do this in the app security under the Administrator tab. You can configure the username and password and set it for the user role administrator. Next is the pages from different user roles. So there's two user roles. There's the executive user role for administrators and the volunteer user role. We will start with the recipient information display page. You can delete entries if you're an administrator, and you can also add new entries or edit existing ones. The goal card, ID, status, and comment have default fields that guide the user what information they should be including. This is helpful for Food for the Flock volunteers to provide some guidance on what the executives are looking for them to answer in their answer. So you can see here, the goal card ID must be 7 digits and must be a valid goal card ID number, or else the system won't accept it. You can see that goal card ID and status are required fields. This means that they must be filled out. So if I do not fill out the status and I only fill out the goal card ID with the same goal card previously used, it will not take the entry and it will give a warning. So the entry is not unique. It's already been used this week and they will have to return at the conclusion of the end of the week. This is done to ensure fairness in the pantry and that recipients are adhering to the rules of the pantry, so you can come once per week and the system verifies that it is a unique entry and once per week. From the volunteer role, they cannot delete existing entries, but they can add new entries or edit existing entries. This helps prevent tampering, and this can be configured in the domain model under the recipient entity and their attributes. You can see the default values that help guide the user. Now we will go to validation rules, and this is where we can adhere that the entries are complete, correct, adhere to the pantry rules, and that required information is present and optional information is given as an optional choice. You can see here it's where I configured the access rules for each user role, so volunteers cannot delete. And I did this for every entity and page that you will see. Going back into the app security, you can see with entity access, this is where you can configure for each page entity what role can delete, read, and write. You can see the very last one, the volunteer cannot create, read, or delete. Cannot delete, edit, or create volunteer roles. Moving on to the donation collection page from the executive role, you can see that donation amount, entry, location, and date entries are required fields. This means that they must be input. The information must be complete. We do this so that the data must be analyzed after the fact that it's entered, and data analysis is really important to have complete and correct data. So those are important fields to the pantry needs. Thus, they're required fields. From the volunteer role, there is no delete button, as you can see, but they can do a new entry. This is configured again in the volunteer entity in our domain model. You can see the attributes, what is required, those are the validation rules, and the access rules. So you can see the volunteer cannot delete the entry. Moving on back to the executive role, we're going to do the volunteer page. This one is different. Again, administrator executives have full access to read, write, and delete entries. Adding a new entry, there's the default values where we have some guidance for the user on what it is executives are looking for in those data fields. Let's go to the volunteer role. So volunteers cannot add themselves or delete entries. They can view existing entries, but they cannot edit those entries. This is again done in the access rules for the volunteer entity. So you can see that this one is different. There we go. The required fields and access rules. Volunteers cannot create or delete or write, so they cannot edit existing entries. Going back to the module security, page access, you can see it there. They can access every page. Again, volunteers cannot create or delete on that volunteer page. This is where you configure that if you needed to change it. This is how I created each page. So for each entity recipient, it got its own page where it displays the information. The on-click buttons, that is add a new entry, links to the new edit page. Also, you can delete the object, so that's what that button does. And then, so they're linked to the new edit page, and this is where you enter the data fields, and they're configured that way. Thank you for watching.